I'd never realized how much of New England is a virtual wilderness. Although I was raised in towns all over Massachusetts, the closest I'd gotten to the woods was 2 weeks at a summer camp when I was 10 or so. Cheryl, on the other hand, knew the rural areas of New England like I wished I knew a deck of cards. Not just the forests, but the fields and pastures of working farms, and probably every ranger and farmer in Massachusetts as well. She tried to teach me the difference between various maples and oaks, where to find jack in the pulpits, how to distinguish between bottle and fringe gentians, magnificent tiny purple-blue trumpet flowers that seemed like they were trying to blast the world with joy. As I continued to hike around the state with Cheryl, the trip seemed to get longer and shorter at the same time. I began to recognize repeated patterns of the different areas we passed through, whether it was the dark hemlock woods and damp vales, nearly impenetrable growths of laurel, thickets of small crowded pines on recently logged land, or the gorgeous stands of massive oaks and beeches of the higher elevations. I often got so lost in my observations that time disappeared, but when we arrived at Cheryl's destination, it seemed as though we'd spent days getting there. Mostly, I loved watching her sweet butt roll up and down as I followed her around the state. When we got back to the apartment, Cheryl took several large-scale transparent maps from her portfolios and fanned them across her bed. She showed me that laying them over a USGS topographical map helped her locate and compare her flowers. I watched as she transferred the information from her field journal to one of the transparencies. She placed whatever leaves she had gathered between two small pieces of cardboard, which she carefully labeled and bound together, then stored in one of her wooden chests. Only when she was finished did she explain some of her nomenclature and what she was looking for. She introduced me to a hidden world which, like one of her overlays, covered a world I thought I was familiar with. Before our next hike, I went to an outdoor clothing store and bought a pair of sturdy boots. After slipping up and down the slopes all day, I wanted something to keep my feet under me. Cheryl grimaced when she saw my new treads, but didn't say anything. She just asked me what size I wore. The next time we went out, she stopped me as we unpacked her pickup. "Put these on instead." She handed me a pair of lightweight shoes with knobby but flexible soles. I have no memory of what plant we were looking for that day, or what types of terrain we traversed to get there, but I do remember the shoes Cheryl gave me felt a lot better than the boots I'd bought, and that Cheryl asked me if they felt better when we took our break. I admitted they did. "I want to explain something to you." Cheryl grasped both my hands and looked at me intently, as if to force me to stare into her wonderful brown eyes. I complied. "You might think walking through the woods is the same as walking on a sidewalk, but it's very different. Imagine that the entire surface of the earth, land, air, and water, is a single organism. Call it the biosphere, Gaia, Mother Earth, whatever. Think of this. You have a penchant for math, don't you? Somewhat, I guess. In a way, the surface of your lungs that touches the air you breathe is still on the outside of your body. Topologically, it's like pushing in on a balloon until you form a sac inside it." I understood her reference from elementary geometry. Imagine something made of a completely stretchable material. If you can change it from one shape to another without tearing it, the two shapes are considered topologically equivalent. Thus a bowl, a plate, and a spoon are the same topological shape, as are the lungs. On the other hand, a cup with a handle isn't, though it is the same as a donut. But I didn't get her real point. "So what?" Cheryl squeezed and released my hands rhythmically as she spoke. I felt like she was trying to massage her meaning into me with her hands as well as her voice. "So, the atmosphere is Earth's lung. It performs all the function of our lungs and many more. It's just that instead of folding over on itself like our lungs, Earth uses gravity to hold its breath in place. And instead of a rib cage and a diaphragm, it uses weather to move air around. Plants are like the alveoli in our lungs. Trees look a little like alveoli for good reason, to increase the surface area in contact with air. So when you go tramping on Mother Earth, tramp lightly. You're tramping through our mother's lung. Cheryl paused. Then, as if she felt she needed to reassure me, she added, "The earth is soft, but she's also tough, like me." With that, she pulled me close and proved her point. Cheryl's comparison of the Earth's atmosphere to a lung did change the way I looked at our walks. Or I should say, my observations began to consist of more than just what I saw. I imagined myself as being inside the Earth and part of it, instead of on top and outside. Every instant was full of sounds and smells that didn't exist outside of the deep woods and their bordering fields. I began to tell myself stories about what I smelled and heard. I became entranced by the choir of daily bird song. The cacophony of the late afternoon birds, peewees, chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, and more, seemed to create a festive party to which we'd been invited. The mystical warble of the hermit thrust, on the other hand, seemed to create an immense void in the woods, with a song that claimed there was only the singer and the listener, and that they could never meet. There was an incessant chirping of insects in the fields, and near swamps often a symphony of bullfrogs, which, en masse, created a din designed to confuse potential predators instead of attract them, all advertising the glorious fact of summer, hot, humid summer. And of course there was always the industrious pounding of woodpeckers, the animal that most reminded me of our own species. In addition to the sounds, we were immersed in the wonderful varied smells and feel of the forest. Bogs, pines, oaks. Each area had its own ambience that changed with the weather. I came to appreciate it all, but on hot, muggy days, when it felt as though we actually were pushing through the earth's breath, I especially grasped the accuracy of Cheryl's explanation. I once mentioned to Cheryl that the woods seemed almost magical. "They aren't almost magical. They are magical," she said. "Magic isn't being able to wave a wand and cast some spell that furthers one's own will. Magic is understanding that we're much vaster than we can know, because we're part of all of this." She slowly waved an arm at the forest, as if she were opening a curtain to reveal a spectacle, which was exactly what she was doing for me.